guy was riding his scooter without a care in the world when, suddenly, Truck-kun did his thing. He ended up in terrible shape. Everything hurt like crazy. Even then, he was still thinking about the model kits he hadn't finished assembling. But now, he didn't think he'd ever get to complete them. Meanwhile, at the northern border of Jingzhou in the Great Ning Kingdom, a group of travelers was making its way forward. They were speaking in some alien language. One of them casually shot down a bird with an arrow, and the bird fell straight into their caravan. They simply picked it up and kept moving. Some of the bird's blood splashed onto a young man lying inside the caravan. Because of that, he finally woke up, groaning that he was somehow still alive and that his head hurt like hell. A little girl nearby happily said that their benefactor had finally woken up. But the guy who had just regained consciousness had absolutely no idea who she was. He kept looking around, confused, wondering who she was, who he was, and what any of this was supposed to be. His head suddenly throbbed even harder. Memories he didn't recognize started flooding into his mind. As he tried to sort them out, he gradually realized that after the traffic accident, he had actually transmigrated and been reborn. The images in his head were the memories of this body's original owner. That original owner was also named Kenli, the second young master of a state duke's family. The emperor of Great Ning had even granted him a marriage to the kingdom's peerless female general, who, according to the memories, happened to be 8 feet tall, incredibly burly, and famous across the land as the ugliest woman in the world. Terrified of the marriage, the original Ken Li had run away from home, only to run right into a northern Utarder raid. Since he was just a scholar with showy but useless kung fu, he saw some injustice, tried to act like a hero, failed miserably, and got captured. After piecing all of that together, the transmigrated Ken Li could only mentally say holy crap. The little girl anxiously asked if he was alright. He insisted he was fine and told her not to call him benefactor anymore since he hadn't even managed to save her properly. He introduced himself as Ken Li and asked for her name. The little girl explained that her surname was Zhao and that her grandfather had always called her Little Grass. The guy then asked the little girl where her grandfather was and whether he was also on this prison cart. The girl, still shaken, explained that her grandfather had stayed behind so she could escape, but she couldn't even finish her sentence. Her voice trembled too much, and she seemed unable to muster all the words she wanted to say. After looking around, the guy finally understood the situation. There were no elderly people on the cart at all. Everyone captured here was either a woman or a child. The leather armor and weapons of 6 nearby cavalrymen looked almost identical, suggesting that they were trained soldiers. The remaining 20 or so men looked a bit weaker, but even then, they were far beyond what this body could handle. Just then, the cry of a young boy echoed through the cart. He was desperately calling for his sister, telling her to say something, wailing between sobs. But the girl he was calling to just lay there, unmoving. The Tartars guarding them heard his cries, but instead of stopping him, one of them only laughed. The boy, trembling with grief and rage, shouted at them that they had killed his sister and that he would kill them in return. The Tartar simply found it amusing and continued beating him as if it were nothing. The child screamed for a while and eventually collapsed weakly inside the carriage. One of the Tartars outside warned him to shut up, saying that if he made any more noise, they would take care of him. The boy could do nothing but keep crying, his small body shaking with fear and grief. Sensing danger in the air, Ken Li instinctively tried to shield the little girl behind him. At the same time, he couldn't help thinking that he truly had been reborn into a chaotic world. Great Ning, famine, war everywhere. Good news, he had transmigrated. Bad news, he had transmigrated into an era where human life was cheaper than grass. Just then, an ethereal sound rose from the depths of his mind. He wondered if it was what he thought it was. As he focused his attention, he found himself entering a strange mental world. A notification floated in front of him, saying, "Daily free 10 pull. To pull more, you must pay." Seeing this, Ken Li could only stare blankly for a moment before wondering aloud if this was supposed to be his golden finger, and if so, why it was just this. 2 options appeared beneath the message, yes and no. He decided to try the pull just to see what kind of good stuff he would get. A whirlpool of mental energy opened up around him, and cards began swirling through the air. Scorched rice, purified water, instant noodles, useless items everywhere. Ken Li wondered what kind of crappy system this was and whether a 10 pull didn't even have a pity guarantee. A new notification appeared. Cards have been stored in the system inventory. Host may access them at any time. First 10 pull completed. Newbie gift pack opened. Rewarding host with 10 pull times 2. Activate. 2 options showed up again. Ken Li felt a tiny spark of hope. He figured the system had seen how miserable his luck was and decided to compensate him. so he immediately activated the 2 extra pulls. Another round of pull, pull, pull echoed through his mind as the mental whirlpool spun again. More cards appeared, mostly the same type of everyday items. Kenley was puzzled and had no idea what to think anymore. But as he looked deeper, he finally noticed something different among the cards. Power Strengthening Pill, Berserk Potion, Kong Zheng's Power Strengthening Pill, items from the Star Armor Soul General Legend world. The description said it was a 3-star pill that could temporarily boost combat power and was Kong Zheng's greatest trump card. There was also a description for the other item, Prototype Berserk Potion, a prototype enhancement potion from the Steel Contract world. Allows the user to enter a berserk state for a short time, greatly increasing combat power, but causes a long period of weakness afterward. Another notification followed. Ding! Cards have been stored in the system inventory. Host may access them at any time. Kenley wondered if this gacha system really allowed him to draw items from the Star Armor and Steel Contract worlds. If so, then did that mean drawing Star Soul Generals or even War Armors was possible? And since he still had one more 10 pull left, he decided to keep going. He pressed the button and immediately started praying, chanting in his mind for a 5-star, something golden, anything good. This time, among the cards swirling around, one looked noticeably more impressive. It shone brighter than the rest. The closer Kenley looked, the more dazzling it became. The description said, Mido's rice, food from the Big Battle World. Mido's specially made white rice, extremely delicious. Another card read, Luo Jin's special cupcake from the creative shape-shifting world. A cupcake Luo Jin made for the Zhao family triplets, very delicious. But the one that truly stood out was the last card. Star Soul General Lu Bu 3-minute trial card from the Star Armor Soul General Legend world. Allows the construction of Star Soul General Lu Bu, but only for 3 minutes. Kenley immediately picked up that card, examining it closely. Even if it only lasted for 3 minutes, he felt it should be more than enough to deal with the crisis he was currently in. A new notification chimed in. Ding! Today's pull quota is exhausted. Pull quota will refresh tomorrow during the Hour of the Tiger. Host consciousness will exit in 3, 2, 1. Before he could react, the countdown ended, and Kenley found himself snapped back into the nightmarish reality of being a captive. He quickly looked around and realized that no time had passed in the real world at all. He concluded that time must freeze outside whenever his consciousness entered the gacha space. The only problem was figuring out how to take the cards out of the system inventory. As he closed his eyes and focused, he finally saw the many cards floating in his mental vision. Kenley decided to use the Star Soul General Lu Bu card, but figured he should first understand how to operate the system properly. He tested a theory, thinking that as long as he selected a card in the system inventory with his consciousness, it would appear in his hand. The moment he focused on that idea, a thought popped up. Now he just had to figure out how to use the card. He chose a small 1-star item to test it on purified water. When he mentally commanded the system to use card, a full bottle of water materialized in his hand. After opening it and taking a drink, he immediately felt refreshed. Satisfied, he decided the first order of business was to let everyone eat and drink their fill. The little girl stared at him in shock. She asked if that was really water and where he had conjured it from. She didn't dare ask for any, even though she clearly wanted to. But before she could even think further, Kenley handed her the bottle, telling her to drink because she must have been thirsty too. Her eyes lit up instantly. She took the bottle as if being handed a treasure and admired it, calling the transparent container a beautiful object, maybe even a legendary glazed glass cup that only nobility used. When she tasted the water, she was stunned, calling it sweet and delicious. After drinking a little, she returned the bottle and thanked him politely. Kenley noticed she had stopped drinking and asked why. She hesitated, thinking that the Tartars had probably been giving the prisoners only the bare minimum these past few days to avoid any mess or disease in the carts. She admitted she was thirsty but said that such precious water only needed to be tasted a little. Kenley told her it was fine, that he had plenty more and even food. He then used more cards to produce additional supplies. After that, he leaned closer and whispered that she should go and call over the kid who had been beaten earlier. They would first eat and drink properly, then he had a plan. The group of Tartars continued marching along the road with their captives. Inside one of the prison carts, Kenley was quietly speaking with Little Grass and the boy who had been beaten earlier, the one who had lost his sister. The boy recognized him and asked if he was the scholar who tried to save people but failed and got captured himself. Kenley didn't bother denying it. He simply simply told the boy he would ask something only once, and the boy only had one chance to answer. Did he want revenge? The boy was stunned. He couldn't believe what he had just heard, but he immediately said yes. Of course he wanted revenge. He wanted all of the Tartars to die. Little Grass flinched at the sheer hatred in his voice as the boy punched the wooden cart in anger. Kenley stayed calm and told him that was good, and that if he wanted revenge, he must follow Ken Lee's instructions. But before anything else, he handed the boy some food he had just drawn. The boy stared at the items in shock, asking why Ken Lee still had water and food, and where he had conjured them from. Ken Lee only patted both Little Grass and the boy on their heads, telling them not to worry about that for now. Just eat and drink, and be careful not to let the Tartar guards notice. Ken Lee then asked if there was anyone else they knew in the other two prison carts. The boy said that Brother Xiong was in the cart ahead, also from their Black Mountain village. Little Grass added that the cart behind them held a few sisters from neighboring Green Mountain village and a young sister-in-law who had married into their village. After hearing this, Ken Lee said he had a plan. As the convoy continued forward, a sudden cry rang out from their cart. Someone was yelling for help and shouting that there was murder happening. When the Tartars turned to look, they saw that it was Little Grass screaming and pointing, shouting that someone had gone crazy. A Tartar soldier came over to check and saw the young boy thrashing around as if trying to attack someone. The guard immediately yelled at him to stop. When the boy didn't, the guard threw something into the cart to make him collapse. Both the boy and Ken Lee went down, and Little Grass panicked as she knelt beside them. After a moment, Ken Lee groaned awake and hurriedly thanked the Tartar guard, calling him my lord and insisting that the child had gone mad. The guard stepped closer and demanded to know what had happened. Ken Lee explained that the corpse inside the cart had already begun to rot, and if it was left there, it would cause disease. Everyone in the cart would die of infection. He said he had only pointed that out, and the boy suddenly went crazy and tried to kill him. The boy suddenly pushed himself back to his feet after hearing Ken Lee's explanation and yelled that Ken Lee was the one who stank and had the plague. He screamed that no one was allowed to touch his sister, and that if anyone came closer, he would strangle them. His voice cracked, but he refused to back down. The Tartars outside frowned and murmured among themselves in their strange language, clearly discussing what to do. Finally, one of them barked an order for two of the captives to move the corpse out. Ken Lee tried to protest, saying the boy was acting crazy, but the Tartar pointed a bow at him and asked if he didn't understand orders. Terrified, Ken Lee immediately bowed his head and agreed to move the body. But even then, the boy kept blocking anyone from approaching his sister. He cried that they should not touch her. Ken Lee tried to reason with him, warning that the guard would shoot them dead without hesitation. The boy finally realized he had no choice. Tears streamed down his face as he backed away helplessly. Even so, as they lifted his sister's body, he kept shouting that he would kill them. Another order came for the corpse to be thrown out. The Tartars pointed arrows at Ken Lee and the rest, making sure they didn't try anything stupid. The guards were confident the situation was under control. That was exactly when Ken Lee chose to act. While the guards were relaxed, Ken Lee secretly selected a card in his mind, the 3-star Kong Zheng's power strengthening pill. He used it immediately, swallowing the pill in an instant. A guard noticed and demanded to know what he was doing. Before anyone could react, the pill's power exploded through his body like a raging fire. Ken Lee could clearly feel himself growing stronger by the second. The system description echoed in his mind. 3-star card Kong Zheng's power strengthening pill. A combat elixir from the Star Armor Soul General Legend world. Temporarily increases combat power. Kong Zheng's greatest trump card. Seeing the sudden change in him, one Tartar shouted that he was courting death and raised his bow. The rest followed suit, and in the next moment, the archers loosed their arrows all at once. Ken Lee's eyes suddenly burned like fire, and in the span of a single instant, he kicked out with such speed that every arrow flying toward him shattered midair. He didn't just block them, he obliterated them. Before the Tartars even processed what happened, he was already behind them. The Tartars froze in shock. One of them muttered in disbelief that this was external release of chi energy, the power of a grandmaster-level martial artist. Realizing the danger, they scrambled to take him down, urging their horses forward. But Ken Lee, feeling the surge of power rapidly draining, understood he only had moments left. He muttered that this was as far as that pill would take him. Without hesitation, he pulled out another card, his true trump card. The description flashed through his mind. 5-star card, Star Soul General Lubu, 3-minute experience card. He knew he was about to cause massive trouble. The Tartars, still believing they could overwhelm him, kept firing arrows and shouting to take him down. Ken Lee, however, was already entering full Chunibyo mode. He had always wanted to use this iconic line from Star Armor, complete with the dramatic pose. And now he finally could. He declared, "Star Soul!" Energy erupted around him like a storm, swirling violently. Then he followed with a deafening construct. In an instant, a colossal armored figure materialized, Star General Lu Bu himself, towering over man and horse alike. The Tartars and their mounts were thrown to the ground by the sheer force of its appearance. None of them had ever seen anything this overwhelming. Ken Lee apologized, saying time was limited, so he would simply send these Tartar barbarians on their way with Lu Bu's Fangtian painted halberd. The Tartars panicked and screamed in their alien language, but Lu Bu's enormous shadow loomed over them as he readied the attack. Ken Lee thought the targets were ridiculously small and hard to aim at with something this huge, but he swung anyway. The Tartars fled in terror, but Lu Bu's massive foot came crashing down, flattening those who couldn't escape in time. Meanwhile, inside the prison carts, Little Grass and the boy watched the scene in trembling awe. The boy stammered, asking if the scholar might actually be an immortal. Little Grass, on the other hand, was bursting with excitement. She declared that her big brother was definitely an immortal, a heavenly soldier and general who must have heard her cries and descended to save them. She was practically glowing with joy. Lu Bu continued standing triumphantly above the defeated Tartars. The Tartars, terrified out of their minds, could only scream in their strange language. They shouted about running, about eternal heaven, claiming that some terrifying devil had descended and was now protecting the two-legged sheep. None of them understood what was happening, only that they were hopelessly outmatched. Lu Bu swung his halberd again, roaring for them to taste its might. One of the braver Tartars yelled that this wasn't eternal heaven at all, that it must be some illusion or trick by the Central Plains two-legged sheep, and shot an arrow at Lu Bu in defiance. Hearing that, Ken Lee immediately took offense. Anger flared in him, and he focused completely on the man. The next instant, he used the Buddha's palm, slamming the brave Tartar flat onto the ground. The remaining Tartars broke into a panic, fleeing in all directions. Ken Lee saw them running and sneered, mentally asking if they really thought they could escape. He unleashed another technique, Mount Tai crushing the top, and came crashing down on the fleeing barbarians. That impact alone guaranteed no one under it would survive. But then, another problem arose. Ken Lee felt the power inside the giant armor fading rapidly. Time was almost up on the 3-minute Lu Bu card. He needed to finish everything immediately. He turned to the prison carts. Lu Bu began smashing the wooden frames one after another, breaking open the captive carts. Prisoners poured out, trembling and crying that a god had descended, thanking the immortal for displaying divine might and saving their lives. The boy from earlier pointed out that there were still a few Tartars fleeing in the distance and insisted they must not be allowed to escape, otherwise they would bring back reinforcements. Ken Lee agreed and remembered that Lu Bu wielded a bow. He summoned the Skybreaker Cloud Red Bow. Since the Tartars loved firing arrows at him so much, he decided to return the favor. One shot was all it took. The beam of power unleashed was overwhelming. Every last fleeing barbarian was vaporized in the explosion. The entire landscape shook from the impact. Even Ken Lee was stunned. He wondered aloud if Lu Bu's power was always this monstrous, and admitted he might have used a little too much force. A final notification echoed. 5-star card, Star Soul General Lu Bu, 3-minute trial card time expired. Please look forward to your next use. The massive armor dissolved into shimmering fragments, and in the blink of an eye, Ken Lee found himself back on the ground, outside the wreckage like an ordinary person again. Ken Lee let out a long breath. He thought that the feeling of activating a Star Soul General was simply too glorious, like he was invincible under the heavens. The satisfaction was unreal. The kid called out, "Brother Immortal," and ran toward him. Little Grass rushed over as well, crying "Big Brother" before hugging him tightly. She insisted that Big Brother had to be a god descended from the heavens. The boy echoed her sentiment, thanking him for saving them and for avenging his sister. He said that such great kindness needed no thanks, and from this moment on, his life, Zhao Monkey's life, belonged to Ken Lee. The other captives, trembling with gratitude, bowed deeply. They repeatedly thanked the immortal for saving their lives. But Ken Lee told them now was not the time for this. They had created an enormous commotion, and scouts from the nearby Tartar camp would definitely come to investigate. He told everyone to stand up first and prepare to flee immediately. As he looked at the survivors, he counted that aside from the ones who had escaped earlier, there were still more than 40 people left. He quietly thought to himself that relying only on the food and water drawn from the system wouldn't be enough to support so many people for long. All he could do was save them selectively, to the best of his ability.